to the final masterclass of the 2022 semester here. Today's topic is arranging for solo guitar, taking a piece of pop music or just any music really and arrange it. And so there's a couple things I think you have to think about before you even get started, which is like step one, let's assume you already have a piece in mind, or you were mentioning a moment ago, well, you have an original riff or something. But let's just say for this class that we're going to take like another piece of music, right? A couple things you have to know, right? What would be two of the things you have to know right away? You got to know the melody, got to know the harmonic structure, got to know the form, right? One of the best ways just to get it, if you don't just get it by ear, which I think if you have the time, I don't think anybody would push back on this, if you figure it out by ear, get the sheet music is another good way to do that. I think that's a really strong way, especially if it has kind of a complicated melody, or do both. And no matter what you do, you have to do lots of listening. So one of my favorite Beatles songs is Eleanor Rigby. It's one that just through the course of like learning guitar and teaching guitar and having it come up from time to time at a gig. Many years ago, I came across a really nice, name's escaping me, but maybe it'll pop in my brain in a moment, arrangement of it, where the person who arranged it just basically took the melody and the chords and it kept it simple, just kept, in four and kind of gave it like a sort of a pulsing bass. Which really suits the song, nice, Right? Sounds great, right? So you have to have some sort of basis to start with. So that arranger, he knows the chords, he knows the melody, he had kind of a concept in mind. And then right before I started officially our video here, you were basically talking about, I don't know the shapes, right? I have to figure out the shapes. And that's a big part of what you have to do on solo guitar. So let's pause right here. So when you're looking at a song that you want to convert to a solo guitar, you basically have to consider those three, factors: melody, the form, the chords. But now we have to deal with the confines of the guitar. Sorry for the sports analogy, but I think a bit of the soccer field, right? Like we have a specific field of play that we can do, and we have a specific number of players, maybe a fifth sometimes, that can come in that have to basically get this job done. So one of the first considerations when I'm thinking about a piece of music is I want something that's going to work well with open strings. That's not the only consideration, but I think if we're talking about most pop music, talking about the phenomenon that generally the guitar sounds best when you're able to utilize open strings and it frees up one of your fingers or players, so to speak, that's a really good thing. In the case of the example I was just giving, Eleanor Rigby is excellent because it's in the key of A minor. A minor is one of the best keys for solo guitar playing, as is C, G, D, anything that can exploit a lot of the open chord shapes. Now there's other options too, and this is where you come into some pretty fantastical chords, like, well, what about a C sharp minor? Well, ooh. So step one, find something that's in a good key. Now, if it's in a weird key, say like that song happened to be in B flat minor, I have a choice to make. I could try to figure out the, and I'll have to kind of go about the process of all right, let me figure this out. Now, I already know it's going to be more work because it's in B flat minor. B flat's tough, E flat's tough. A bit of irony here, and I use that word sparingly, E flat and B flat are both great vocal keys, and so you're going to run into a lot of material that happens. Here's a hack. Ooh, we always like that word hack. Detune your guitar half step. Boom. You match the original key. You give your guitar more sonic depths. A lot of times, having said that, I'm leaving in regular E, but detuning to E flat is a great way to cover those keys. Another option there would be to, if it's in a higher key and detuning isn't a quick option, capo. A good example of this is one of my favorite arrangements to play is Love Song by The Cure, and I love the 311 cover of it. I really love, I think Adele did a cover of it in kind of a bossa nova style. And of course, her key's in C minor. And so I'm like, okay, well, I can put this on 3rd fret, play my open A minor shape. Of course, make sure your capo's good. If I were to give 30 seconds to capo, capo is very important because you want to pick a capo that isn't going to excessively cause tuning issues. All capos cause some degree of tuning issues. Adjustable tension capos like the shub is a really popular one. You want to get one of those. General capo placement, I always shoot for not like on the fret, but about a 1/4 inch behind the fret. And then I'm going to make sure it's tight. Usually the culprit string on nylon is the first one. I can maybe twist it and get at that point a little closer to the back of the fret. Not too bad, right? That's not too perky. Not like the old springy ones where you basically have to retune. Okay. And so here, she sings this in C minor, so now I can basically use my capo and I can have it in that new key. Or if I play the melodic hook. Right, all that sounds really nice in this open position. Here's a free, nice, easy chord. I might have already shown you this one. The E add F. That's always a really nice, spicy chord, especially for a minor chord and a 5 in a minor key. And it goes back. So key, right, kind of go back to where I was departing there. So key is really important. So utilizing songs that are in open key or being willing to change the key or detuning a half step or even a whole step sometimes, but I don't like to go too much because the strings lose responsiveness. And then, of course, capo, and then just be sure of your capo choice. So I think that's a really important thing. I think the next important thing is you got to pick a song that has some melody to begin with. Here, I don't want to be like grumpy old guy, but you have to watch it because there's a lot of things that are popular because so much of like hip hop genre continues to still, like I would just generally make the argument that music today, and this has generally been true the past 20 years, is more beat-based than melodic-based. Doesn't mean there isn't great melodic music being made, there is, but you need to find it and consider that. So there's a great guitar player online. He did a cover 21 Pilots song. Ethan, I think is that it? You know, the first part works great. You know, da 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 da. But when you get to the verses of that, and I love 21 Pilots, kind of like the one note verse. Da 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 da. My feeling on this, when you have verses that are like that, is it's really hard to make them work well on a purely instrumental basis. You know, you're basically relying on somebody who's listening that knows the song so well, and then you actually have to, I would argue, make more work, even though it's just on one note, because you really have to like make it seem like you're playing all the words. In general, it's better to try to lean towards that, making it sound like you're playing the words, but that isn't like a rigid rule. I think if that's the only thing that's important, then I also think that gets a little bit boring, and I think it takes away the interpretation. You should feel just like a singer can, like you're free to like reinterpret the melody. Like a jazz person, though, jazz guy always say, you better learn the lyrics to the melody. And that's absolutely true in like a pop genre too. Like if you know the lyrics, you'll be able to do it from a more strong place. Yeah. One of my favorite covers is the 9 Inch Nails song that Johnny Cash covered. Sadly, the last song he ever recorded that hurt, you know. I hurt myself today to see if I still feel. Focus on the pain, the only thing that's real. So I have a really good sense of like where those lyrics are. And so like I'm able to kind of rhythmically frame that. So make something in a good key, make sure the song has like some melody to work with. The same is true, but it's actually easier if the harmony is static. So you have like the 1 chord or the 2 chord jammer. It's almost easier to make that work if it has some melodic activity than vice versa, like the 1 note melody. Ironically, once again, twice I use that word, when you came in, I was playing, of course, the famous jazz song, Note Samba. Now that makes it work because you have 1 repeated note, but you have all this harmony coloring around it. like that's all like basically one note. I want to kind of say it for this class, more focus on pop stuff. So like, yeah, jazz tune. Pop just means popular music, but I think to be more specific, American pop music, more like folk music, singer-songwriter, rock stuff, not just popular music in the general sense. So you got to have a good key. You got to have something with some melody. And then a good hook, of course, always helps. Usually, even in a really static melodic song or hip hop song, style song, the hook will be melodic. So like you get like a little bit of help there, but it's even better when the verses and the bridge or there's even a little melodic jingle between it. And then it's like melody, 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 melody. Have you guys heard Lovely the Band? You familiar with that? So probably their best known song, or I guess their biggest radio hit, is a song called Broken. And like it's got a great hook. But in addition to like really nice melody, it's got some nice chords, it has this little melodic thing that like I know everybody's going to hum along or sing la 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 with, la 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 la. Does that part sound maybe slightly familiar? This is kind of like an aside or a bullet at the bottom of the page. Like that's, I think, good songwriting technique, have a simple 3 or 4 note pentatonic singing riff, right? Like we hear that all the time. One of my favorites, I think I made both of you learn it, Wake Me Up by Avicii. Yeah, like that one's such a great example. In fact, without that, the song doesn't quite work as well, it's perfectly great lyrics, but when that melody comes in that has no words, that's like the most moving part of the song. This is very interesting. I've just thrown out a bunch of examples, and meanwhile, I've just been throwing accompaniment around it. Okay, so let's get into some nitty-gritty stuff right here. So most of the time when we're looking at melodies, if we were to be just generally speaking, most melodies, when there's held notes or tones moving, they tend to be more chord tones than non-chord tones, right? And we know what chord tones are. So 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, if it's in a chord. Non-chord tones are like the 2, 4, 6, or the chromatic tones. Doesn't mean they're off limits, just means that's not generally the case. Going back to any one of those, hurt. So it starts on the 5 of the next chord to the 3rd of the next chord, root of the D chord to the lowered 7th that happens to kind of have a D7 sound, and then back to the 5th scale degree of the 1 chord. All right, so here's where any guitar player who's learned their open chords could do a little like extra thinking. If you can take a look at any of your open chords and quickly identify either with a pick or with your fingers, I'll do some pick stuff now, where's the root, where's the 3rd, where's the 5th? So on a C, here's our root, right? Happens to be in a good range too. I didn't really talk about range yet, but this is a pretty easy concept. Generally speaking, the melodies are going to sound better in the higher range of the guitar. Specifically, that means strings 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4. You have to be very thoughtful and creative if you go lower than that. And there's lots of great examples. Here we have our C chord. Our root is in a great spot. Our 3rd happens to be the open strings. That's kind of in the standard form. And then anyone that's played guitar a little bit, we can kind of consider that like somewhat of an advanced beginner guitar chord, but it's the 5th on top. Well, that's perfect there for the triad, 1, 3, 5. Not only that, but you have the passing tones of the scale pretty easy here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Great. If we look on the bass side, very easily we have access to the 5th, which can be really nicely done. In fact, if we just switch to the 5th on the non-chord tones, it basically is going to create a 1-5-1 harmony. Right? And so you already know the C chord, we can already figure that out, and then go through that with other chords. You'll notice some open chords have more options than others. G, for example, you have the root on the 3rd string, 3rd on the 2nd string here, fifth, still on the second string, dominant 7 or major 7, or the root on the first string as well. So you have a whole bunch of stuff chord tone wise available to you, not to mention the whole scale. But teacher, should I practice my open chords and scales like that? You don't have to. But if you want to get into this, I think it's really helpful, right? Just kind of in the general notion of that question, because I think sometimes we all ask ourselves that, even if we've been playing guitar for a while, even at a university sometimes, do I have to do that? Do I have to do this? No one's saying you have to do anything, but like I think what you want to find is the stuff that's interesting to you, really explore that, you know, in depth, because there isn't enough time to explore everything. A lot of times making the extra work to like know all the stuff, even to the tippy top note of your guitar, is always worth it. Okay, so you can go through, I'm not going to go through that for the next 20 minutes because that would be rather dull. A good example of a chord that kind of goes the other way is like if you had a chord like F. Here you're in a little bit of a quandary, right? Because like F, even though it isn't an open chord, I think of it as like a first cousin of open chords because it gets used so much. Remember, open chord has to have an open string in it, technically, to be an open chord. But if we look at F, well, the third is kind of tough. Like we play the simple form, there's just not much meat on the bottom. You can play this kind of lower form. That's kind of neat. You know, here you can kind of get it. But then, you know, if we kept it in just that upper form, you have that fifth, root, 9, and then you're out of position. Now, of course, it'd be great to systematically go through all of this, you know, and know where all the chord tones were in every position. But a lot of times when we're doing this, once again, open, you know, kind of solo guitar arranging of pop stuff, a lot of it is written using more simpler harmonies and open chord stuff. Take it to a totally different level, and of course you can look this stuff up on your own. If you look at great jazz guitar chord melody players like Wes Montgomery, Joe Pass, there's so many great ones. Jonathan Kreisberg has some great solo stuff. Peter Maz's monster solo player, Freddie Bryant. You know, it's almost a thing that George Benson, every great guitar player kind of figures this out. But if we think of it in the pop idiom, those are kind of the harmonies we're going to find. So it just makes sense that like if you're going to take the time to do this, guys, explore that stuff first. D can be like great too. You got this third. It's really easy to convert to this D on top. But then you have the root here, but then like you lose, you know, it's kind of a thin sounding chord. What I like about D is you got that F sharp on the bottom. So to kind of recap here, look at your open chords, find where your chord tones are easy access wise on the top part, meaning the trebly part of the guitar, and then likewise figure out a couple of bass tones. C, O, root, third, fifth. Now when you know where those are, that's going to help your melody, but then you heard in that quick MIDI example, it can kind of help you come up with like a feel or a style. This is where the hard work, I think, really begins. Because depending on how comfortable somebody is with fingerstyle playing, some options are going to be available and then others aren't. One of the quick ways you can just get started, whether you play fingers or not, is just to use your pick. You know, basically play long chords and just kind of see where that melody lays. And then go back and kind of, sometimes writing this down on paper is helpful, you know, figure out where can you place the beats. Don't discount like, you know, just kind of letting stuff ring out and play as like a way that you can present a song altogether. You know, like I sort of would generally describe that as like a rubato presentation. Darn, that dream of jazz example. Let's think of a different pop example here. Or actually, you know, one that I was just doing a moment ago. We'll just kind of put my reading to the test a little bit. Joni Mitchell's Both Sides Now. It's a good example. So, you know, here you can kind of see I have the sheet music. I know this is legit, you know, sheet music. It's got a really simple piano accompaniment. I could play the piano accompaniment. Even a good piano player, they're not going to play what's there, right? We know they're going to like add on and do some more idiomatic things. But what I like is I got my melody and my chords really clear. So now let me just kind of put it together. So the first thing I might do, key of G, this is great. Looks like a D in the melody. Got this great open G chord that I can play here. I'm not going to worry about any thing in the bass. I'm just going to see if I can kind of, holding that chord out, play this melody. So we have, since it's the beginning of a new bar here, I'll probably restrum or play the chord. Oh, wow, that like worked marvelously. You know, flows and flows of angel hair. Beautiful lyric, right? Going on to the next bar. Oh, here we have a chord shift halfway through, B minor. All right, so your close open chords, right? And in fact, just generally speaking, anybody who's ever learned guitar, after you get your open chords, the very first bar chord you usually have to master is a B minor, right? F and B minor. And of course, we know we can move them around from there. So B minor, well, it turns out this B minor, just like its cousin A minor, has the third right here, and then the fifth, which is the next note in the melody, right here. So really easy to just jump in that third bar. 1, 2, 3, and all right there. I'll go through just the rest of this line, but like this process, I'm sort of would equate it to like I'm building the scaffolding of the house. Like I can figure out like how I'm going to fill it in later, but at least now I have like some sort of structure to work with. I look at my next chord, C. Here's a good one, F sharp on top. So I'll open up the floor. What's an F sharp against a C major? What would we describe that as?
Sharp 4.
Sharp 4, yeah. So which would be like which mode? Yeah, like a Lydian sound. We have our C, the F sharp we want is here. It's not really practical to like bang out the whole C shape, right? And like still get that note. So one option here is I might just throw my index finger on top and play, I'll do this with my pick. I could either actually play that, the major 7 is in the chord. You know, really pretty. It's almost like I discovered a new chord here, C major 7, sharp 11. It goes to G, and then I can finish it off with a G chord. So let me pause and kind of like recap where we are, give you a chance to ask any questions. So we're selecting a song. We've thought about something with a good key. We've acquired a reliable set of the music, either like some sheet music or digital sheet music that we've trust, or we've learned it by ear. Picked a song that has some good melody, so we have something that we can work with, and now we're basically looking at putting that melody with some open chords, and we're not sweating any accompaniment yet as far as like rhythmically what's going to happen. You know, once again, I think I just said the scaffolding of the house, so we've just, you know, continuing to construct this scaffolding. So we last left off like we have this kind of interesting harmonic situation, F sharp, and it's going to resolve to the G. Just to finish out the stanza, we have a C, 5's on top. Oh, that's great. Like, that sounds nice. It's in a beautiful singing range on the guitar, so this is great. We have a note that jumps up here to B. We're just going to let it hang. All right, if you're watching this masterclass, here's maybe one of the most important things about playing solo guitar. Do not feel compelled to have to block everything all the time. It is perfectly fine if you do so in a musical and an emotional manner, that you can play all this great harmonic stuff, even without all the accompaniment, and let a note simply be by itself, and then come back to it. That being said, of course, if we had much more time, it could be like, there's all sorts of ways you can harmonize it. Change to, C major 7, that's a really easy inversion. It's also nice sometimes to just let things hang by themselves. So that's kind of the end of my big point. Don't feel compelled to have to put a block chord on everything. It gets a little bit boring, actually. Pops up, and then back to the root here, B, and then we have this A minor 7, C here, open B, back to the C. Oh, well, that works great. We have like a hammer-on pull-off option, so we can move some shaping options. Back to the D, same chord. Here's one of these tricky situations. So the melody's ending a little low. It's a D. We can get away with this, right? We can get away with just the open D and the A. A great trick, though, I've learned just, from just listening to great jazz guitar players, you can, of course, put an inversion on this chord. You could present it as an inversion. All sorts of reasons to do this. Sometimes it's to, get something happening on the bass side, but in this case, we can use it simply to give it more body on the bottom, either whether we play it with the fifth or just with the root. Third root, fifth, So if I kind of like present that bar again, right, even without adding stuff, it seems bigger. Now, of course, on a bar like that, this is the next step. Okay, well, now we need to add some things. Okay, so what you want to do here is you want to look for easy, not just to always be easy or like, you know, we can only place things simple, but like as a means of getting started. Or I like the figure of speech, low-hanging fruit. Start with like the low-hanging fruit here. We'll kind of start a little backwards here. So starting with that like last bar there where we have a 5-chord D, we're in the key of G. You know, here, the melody is listed as a whole note. If we just left the chord like that, it's really boring. Here, even though we don't have a lot of stuff to do, pedal the bass, play 4-quarter notes or like a syncopated rhythm, something as simple as that. We could do a simple arpeggiation, you know, alternating those two notes. You could even play above the melody if you do so dynamically right. Right, and so there I was able to kind of play above the melody. There's limitations, right? I mean, like we're not like a singer, like, and in general, on acoustic guitar, one of the main limitations is just sustain, right? Like I have like this nice quilter amp, I got like some reverb going, but even then, you get 6 seconds at the most to sustain. It's hard to, because a vocalist can hit a note and finish it strong, like a wind player. They can continue, or bowed instrument, you can continue to supply like energy for the note to vibrate. On the guitar, not so much unless you're, you know, like actively playing it, or, you know, you have to have, you know, some vibrato helps. A couple of easy ideas there. I like something like this, like I might start thin and do something contrapuntal. You know, I know it's perhaps a little churchy or gospel-y. That last bar, we have this long open note, lots of different things we could do. Now, the 2 bars before, we have a much more active melody on the and a 4, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3, 4, 1. All right, so all of that. Right? Without doing anything, it sounds like a busy bar. Look for the holes there. So like after this first little break, in the space on B2, I can play that bass note, grab my next melody note, and there I have an option. I could you know, play like a syncopated, like 1, 2, bum, bum. I might not like that. But I'm looking for the holes to play that. You know, sometimes what I will do is just let my thumb kind of figure out like where are those holes. But you know, generally the fingerstyle approach, you have your index, middle, and ring finger taking care of business on the top 4 strings, and your thumb is filling in on whatever's left on the bottom side. So like. So it seems like. Right there on 3 is a nice spot. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3. So right there is kind of a more steady feel. Depending on if I want to decorate the melody more, I might have some other options. What if I wanted to do like a harmonization? Right, that kind of is nice. Maybe there I can have a more active bass pedal. Right, you know, there's not unlimited options, but there's actually quite a few options that work well. And, you know, once again, they're easy, and that like they're like they're available to you, like there's options. And depending on, you know, an individual's proficiency with right and left hand, how many chords you know, what you can do, you can open up or unlock more of those options. Tommy Manuel, one of the best at this style, you know, he's the first to tell you, you can watch several instructional videos, the key a lot of times is the thumb on the right hand, you know, like it really has to almost operate, because it almost has to be the same as like 3. Yeah. It's like 3 and 1 right here. And so you have to kind of think about how you're going to work that out. So that's like one of the things I'll kind of go through, and we could kind of, you know, finish this out and sort of look for, you know, where are those spots, you know, and fill it in either with a bass note or things that are like arpeggiation under the chords. If I were to kind of just, you know, extemporize a little bit from the beginning of this. Sorry, trying to earball it a little bit. I love that phrase. But you get the idea. So, you know, nothing too fancy. I'm kind of letting things happen as they are. There's, you know, great exercises you can do with your right hand to have more options. Some of these I think you're familiar with. The Giuliani arpeggios, you know, that's a great one. Of course, all 120 are great, but not all 120 are like useful in like the practical, you'll use them every day sense, you know. But there's definitely sets like the first 17 or 18, and then later on in the book, I think like 80 through like 92 or something, you know, where there's some like really simple practical ones that are good. Another one, there's a guitarist, I think is Miguel Ablones, had kind of a similar one. He just wrote it out with open strings, and it's patterns like, and he's maybe almost a little bit more like Philip Glass with it, or Steve Reich, a little pedantic. I think practically speaking, the best way to kind of like see what you need to be able to do is to look up some arrangements by some guitarists who have written their stuff out, and you can kind of see like how do they do it. Some guitarists, it's really arranged and neat and tight, and they do it that way. And then there's other ones like the Tommy Manuels, the Frank Vignolas, that it's like their hair's on fire, Pascal Grasso, and it's like they're clearly just amazing technical players and able to do, you know, so much more. But you can listen to other players that are much more subdued, and it sounds great, you know. So it's really a matter of taste, and of course, you know, part of the challenge of the instrument is, you know, how far can you stretch it. Some of the things I like to think about though, like, so let's say, okay, I got my song, I like the key, I've figured out the melody, I can kind of get through the whole thing in some way. Now what? Well, now I think is really the time to open up your arranger's toolbox and kind of think about, well, what are the things that I can do to maybe make this arrangement more mine, rather than just sort of like a instrumental replica of the song. And so here, I think you need to think about things as like reharmonization, melodic improvisation or reorganization, maybe changing the keys, maybe adding material inspired or related to the original material. Exactly, changing time signatures, changing feel, you know, those are kind of the same thing. Right, so there's like all, you know, maybe you have a key change in the song, maybe there's a whole other thing, add a solo section, right, add an intro and an outro. So there's all these things from like something that's just reharmonizing a couple chords to like adding additional material, maybe completely original or based off of thematic harmonic material, you know, from the song. To compare it to the kitchen though, if you try to do all of these at once, it usually is not good. You know, it's usually too much. You got to like pick one or the other. And so I think if you pick like 2 is like a good kind of way to go about it. Like, okay, so maybe I'll add some reharmonization and I'll change the feel. Oh, okay, great. Or maybe 3, like I will add an intro, change the key signature or the feel, and I'll have a couple reharmed chords. That's great. I think a good example, if I were to give kind of a personal one, so like earlier I played Eleanor Rigby. I was thinking, all right, well, I want to do something different. Like everybody has played Eleanor Rigby. And so I was thinking, well, I want to try some different feels. And I thought about maybe like a 3/4. And then I wound up stumbling on, well, what about like a Dave Brubeck, like a take 5? And then I was like, okay, well, can I figure that out? You know, I don't want to like leave too much hanging here, but like there is a little bit of an art to like figuring out how to change a melody so it fits over a different meter. Check out Brad Meldau. There's so many people who are masterful at this. So instead of like in the 4, Eleanor Rigby, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I was like, oh, I really like that. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna keep that. Another decision I made with that one is that I decided to get rid of that first melodic. I know that's like that's how it starts, right? Like, why would you do that? I love the chords then. I was like, you know what? What if, because I'm thinking people know the song so well, that if I hide that from them, and then they can hear it later. Yeah. And I change it. And so I was like, all right, well, let me do something that will bring out the 5. And in this case, I was thinking something that was maybe, since it's so floaty on the top, I think contrast is always good. So I wanted something that was maybe a little bit more rhythmically busy. It's a F major 7 sound to an A minor sound. You can't walk through the passing tone, right? That's really one of the most common chord progressions. And then for the 5, what if I used a triplet against the 5? That's kind of spicy, right? Like an odd on an odd. And so I came up with triplet, 3, 4. So it's 3 triplets and a half note. It has the same feeling, I think, as Eleanor Rigby. It creates the mystery of it. And then when you hear the melody come in, it's like the listener's surprise. Like, oh, now I know what it is. Right, we have that, I recognize this, right? Go through the hook. So, I know there's a lot of stuff going on here, but we have that same mysterious feeling though, but now that the listener knows what song it is, I know in your own head you could hear, look at all the lonely people, and kind of fill it in your own head, right? You say, oh, it's like a cop-out, you just didn't want to do it. Like, oh, that's not true. I mean, I could figure it out if I wanted to. I'm more thinking of like Haydn's Surprise Symphony. Yeah. Like I'm more thinking of like, I really try to think like the listener. Yeah. I try to think like if I'm sitting on the other side of this and I'm hearing this, like, I don't want to make too many assumptions. It's really easy as guitar players. Like we constantly live in our own head and we're like, there's almost this conversation that happens, good or bad. The listener has no knowledge of this conversation, nor they want this, And so a lot of times I feel like when we're learning this instrument, we'll just be so keyed on like, just trying to execute or do whatever and just trying to like maybe smile with our face, and that's about as much as we can manage. And we're not even giving any effort to like, well, how is this whole show being perceived? How is this piece being perceived? It's a careful double-edged sword, right? You don't want to be too much like, oh, how are people perceiving me? And you get all like, that's not really what I'm saying. It's not like that like ego thing. Do they like me? It's more about like, is this music being communicated? Like that's what we're doing here. We're trying to communicate this beautiful music. And when you do it instrumentally, as I kind of feel this way, and I've definitely had people make this comment to me, it almost makes a song have a new meaning. Yeah. And that's something pretty special because we can hear this beautiful song that we love that has this beautiful message, but then it can be presented in this different way. And it's like holding up a picture in a different light. And you're like, I didn't notice that before. Or, I thought this song was about this, but now I think it's about this. Or in the case of my sister, one of the songs I covered, Black Hole Sun, she's like, I've never liked that song, but I like your version of it. Not because I'm your sister, just because it made me appreciate the song. So those are a couple of examples, just a few things you can do. So, take a song, I changed the key signature, I added an intro that's a little bit different from the original intro, but I had some different reasoning for why I might do that. Ultimately, you have to just make your decisions and stand by them. Not everybody's going to like everything you do, just like you don't like everything that everybody else does. Like there's some stuff like, that person's good, I just don't care for their style. Perfectly fine. Once we get over that, like life's easier. Not everybody's going to love everything you do. But as long as you make good decisions that have some basis, something. And of course, one of the great things about like with each tomorrow that you experience, you have more experience to draw upon to make those decisions. But you simply have to go through that process in an active way. Like, if you're passively or not doing this at all, you're not going to like wake up 10 years from now and be the master of it. But if you're working on it every day, by all means, yes, you'll have so much more to say in 10 years. 10 months, if you worked on it on a consistent basis. One other thing specific to that arrangement of Eleanor Rigby is I thought that's great, but then I was like, it felt a little like it was missing something. And so what I decided to do is add an additional section and just kind of open it up. And I was thinking, well, my inspiration for this section is I want to play upon this great harmonic relationship between the F major and the A minor. I think that's one of those things that you hear it in film scores and compositions. It's like a very emotional kind of harmonic sound. Even if you don't know harmony, it kind of makes you feel that way. It's got a little major, but the minor is in a spot you don't expect. It's in that submediant, position. And I was like, well, what if I took that around through some different keys? And so I get back to my original. I'm like, well, what if I go down a half step? Like that, that kind of has a nice sort of dreamy world feeling, and then my C miter's right here. I can kind of change my groove, but keep it in 5. I can do that same technique, right? Go down a half step to that key. Now I'm to D sharp minor. I just really wanted to use a D sharp minor, right? And then to follow the sequence, I would go down. So there's like a little pattern that started to evolve, the F sharp minor. What I decided to do there, that I could have kept it on D. Something, once you work on a song long enough, you find different pathways. It's like, I will play kind of a scalar run, or almost like a chord, but present it in like a melodic fashion. And then, give it some melodic tilt. And then I kind of get out of it because my next chord would then be F major. So I sort of rounded the loop. So what is kind of neat, if you knows what I did there, where's my key centers? A flat, B major, F major, so they're all a minor third apart. Yeah. It's a little bit not like giant steps. Giant steps does the same thing, but it does a major third apart where your key centers are B major, G major, and then E flat major. I basically take in like, well, I'm going to do it in 4s. Usually we think of, that should be the diminished sound, right? Like, it should be like a B diminished to the G diminished to the F diminished to the A flat. But I was like, no, I'll do it with major 7s. I think that's like a beautiful sound, it makes me feel a certain way. So anyway, so I get back to the cycle and just kind of play on those two, and made some decisions there. But to kind of get back to more of the global thing that I'm hoping I'm communicating to you is, so I took that song, I knew it worked well, and then once I had the melody and chords under my fingers, I was like, okay, let me change it up. And so I tried a couple different things. I added an intro, I worked out the melody in a different time signature, and then I went and added a whole middle section. And now, at the end of that process, I feel like I can say, like, okay, I have like really made this song my own. Yeah. I've like really transformed it, and like it's my arrangement of this song, and it has kind of all the things that I like, right? Like how I like to spice my food, right? It has, I love odd time signatures. I love the harmonic material in the song. I love the lyrics, even though I'm playing it instrumentally. I think it's really an interesting lyrical song. I love the original instrumentation, you know, even though I'm playing it solo. So like I love the song deep down, but I feel like I've kind of captured how I feel about it, like about it, and like with my personal taste and preferences and things that just, let's be honest here, that I can pull off, right? That's ultimately, in a sense, what we're limited by, that we don't want to think about it. But you're like, yeah, you know, I am not a Pascal Grasso or a Peter Mazza or a, you know, Wes Montgomery. I'm Max Guys. I can only be me. You know, you could only be you. So that would be, just to kind of wrap things up here, you know, sort of my step-by-step, I guess if you could kind of put it that way, sort of the various decision points I make, not in a specific order, but kind of in that order, yeah. And I feel like that really helps me inform it. And like anything else, any writing process or arranging process, as you do it more and more, you develop a workflow that's unique to you, in the sense that like you know what works and what doesn't, and you know what works better and what doesn't work better. Then occasionally you come across almost like a new drop-down menu that you didn't even know was possible. Like, oh, I never considered like this whole set of options, but now it is possible because you have this other bit of your workflow mapped out. One of the things just to be wary is the first couple times you go through this process, it's the hardest. I know I've made lots of metaphors or analogies. You know, I love to make food. If you've ever tried to cook pancakes, usually the first one or two you pour and flip are not so good. You know. So you're going to have a couple of dead pancakes. That's okay. You're not writing your opus 1 solo arrangement your very first try. You know, it's a process of trial and error. I think you kind of take the points that we've talked about today, kind of think about like where you individually need to fill in your, I hate to use deficiencies, but just where can you get even better? You know, where, I suppose like corporate speaker, where's the opportunities for growth, right? Where are your opportunities for growth? Okay, I need to get some more jazz chords down, or I need to work on some more finger patterns, or I need to just learn some more songs. That's usually a deficit I find even with really talented guitar players. They just don't know many songs. Really learn some songs like inside and out, so you just know them. So anyways, well, thank you so much for listening today. I hope it was helpful. I was really glad to get to talk about it. So yeah.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.